Hi, everyone. Happy Monday. Happy May 1st. Craziness. This year is flying by. And I know so many of us say that every year, but it's still true nonetheless. It was actually very sunny earlier, and now I'm realizing I got so dark out. So apologies. I thought we were going to have a nice sunny episode, but over here it got very cloudy, but that's okay. We got the string lights on. I have my little neon light in front of me, got a lamp over here. So we're doing fine. We'll be great. But yeah, let's go ahead and get started on this episode, shall we? This is episode 66 of Overtures. My guest today is from a lot of places, but mostly grew up in Hawaii. He went to Wagner College for theater and is currently living in New York City, working in specialty coffee. He's currently rediscovering a passion for specialty coffee and spends much of his time refusing to be photographed in any capacity. As a reminder, please no flash photography. He will get unreasonably startled. I've been lucky enough to work with my guest on several shows, both acting and directing, and each opportunity to work together is an absolute blast. He's also a very, very good friend of mine, so it's going to be nice to actually sit down and chat theater for a full hour. So without further ado, this is Austin Nakamura.
Hello.
Quite a grand entrance. I love it. I saw you prepping for it, like in the corner over here, and I was like, hell yeah. And it's funny because I was saying how it was not sunny, and then I looked over and you like opened your like shades for a second. I was like,
Yeah,
well, apparently Brooklyn still got the sun, but Harlem said no, just clouds now. So maybe you'll get that here in the next 15 minutes, but we'll see.
Probably.
How are you doing today? How's it going?
I'm doing pretty well. It is going pretty well. No major complaints, at least.
Thank you for joining me, considering that I know you have several hours of D&D later on. I appreciate you joining me for another hour, but right beforehand.
Absolutely.
I appreciate it. Getting right to it, I always like to say how I know my guest, and we know each other, just like many of my guests, from Wagner College. We went to school together. I believe that we met in our Jazz 2 class, like dancing. But at the same time, I know we didn't really ever talk in class.
Yeah.
Because we were dancing.
my first clear memory of like hanging out with you guys, I believe, was it was some sort of party was happening. All I remember
It was probably organs.
I want to say I ended up in your room.
That sounds right.
And then Zach was there and mentioned Yu-Gi-Oh.
And you were like, I'm here, I'm down.
I'm like, that's me. I've got
You're
Yu-Gi-Oh
like,
cards.
you were like, I found the friend group, let's go.
Yeah. And
Okay,
then,
I do actually remember that. I vaguely do remember that, specifically about the fact that you both had Yu-Gi-Oh cards, and I think you both had them in your rooms. So
yeah,
that does sound vaguely familiar. And like I know we took modern dance and several other classes later down the line, but we were already friends at that point. So
yeah,
it's just one of those friendships that we're like, how did it start? I don't know.
just kind of did. Who
Just
knows?
kind of did. It happened. But
Yeah.
I think what really solidified our friendship was being in A Midsummer Night's Dream together at the end of your freshman year, my sophomore year, where you
Yes.
played puck and I played bottom. That
Hell yeah.
was a hell of a show and a hell of a time. And of course, our good friend Ryan Fisher
Oh
was
my
also a
gosh.
part of that grand scheme. But yeah, I
Yeah.
think it was definitely that show that we were like, okay, friends, yes.
Was that the one where Ryan was not originally cast, and then because
That sounds familiar. That sounds
because
like something that would happen to him.
because right, because
Yes, because
Sammy had to
I
drop
think
out, which is how I
yes.
became Puck, and then
Yeah, because you moved up, to puck, and then we needed someone, I guess, to play flute, which I guess ended up being Ryan. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. What a
wild.
time. That was a wild show, but that's okay because that started laying the groundwork for the Shakespeare we would continue to do together later on.
True,
So it
absolutely.
all worked out. And of course, like following that next semester year, we've taken like Shakespeare class together, and I feel like that was also one that we very much bonded in because it was in the English department and not the theater department, and I don't think we anticipated how that class was going to go in any way, shape, or form.
Um, more writing than I expected,
Yes.
but
And a lot of more theory that I feel like we were forcing upon
I mean, I
the
like
text.
theory, but that's me.
I do well, and here's the thing, I like theory as well. However, I feel like sometimes if you're getting to a point where you're breaking the theory in so many different directions, I don't know that it's working well with the Shakespeare. You know what I
I
mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's also like Shakespeare's weird when you start getting into it because it's like it's an adaptation of a story that's also an adaptation from a different story in a different
Yep.
like there's just like 5 layers
Layers
of
upon layers.
history on it,
Yeah.
and then you also anyway, it's just like a lot. So it's like
Yeah.
theory can just kind of go
Yep, pretty much, pretty much. Oh my gosh. But then in general, all of my Wagner memories with you are either from like working on a show together, directing, or when several of us would spend an entire evening showing each other weird or cursed videos in the weird parts of
oh,
YouTube.
fantastic.
It
Great
happened
time.
like once a semester where we would go, is tonight the night? We're all just gonna pack in and
Yeah, that was a good time.
it was a good time. You, me, Emily, and Zach. It was grand. But I think it definitely formed all of our senses of humor. So it was great. It was
Oh, hell yeah.
fantastic. So going back to the beginning of things, how did you first get started in theater?
So man.
I know it's a toughie.
Well, so I got into theater completely by accident.
That sounds
Which
right.
so I had just moved from the Big Island to Oahu. So I was in
Okay.
7th grade. Um, and every year our middle school did a musical. And I was like, I have literally no friends and nothing to do because I just got here. So I auditioned and then I got in. And I was like, hey, this is kind of fun. And so then I just like kept doing theater, and then suddenly it was like junior year of high school, and I was like, interesting.
You're like interesting. That's amazing how time flies.
I'm like, I think I am more committed to this than I thought I was. So yeah,
I love that. And I love that that was your first. You're like, well, I have no one to talk to and I have nothing to do. So pulls down flyer. I guess I'll do this. Like,
pretty much. And it was just, but I mean, like all of my closest friends from high school, and just like I was very fortunate that the school I went to has a fantastic theater program,
yeah.
and just performing arts and arts programs in general. Like I'm someone I graduated high school with is debuting a piece this weekend in New York
That's
as
amazing.
part of a grant for the Eric Taylor Dance Company. And it's like, damn.
That's cool
And
as heck.
yeah, it's like I know that person.
You're like,
so
wait a second.
so
So
that's
then
cool. I'm showing up
was
there
it
randomly on Saturday.
oh, absolutely. That's gonna be great. And you just surprise them and you're like, hey.
That's the plan. I don't want to tell them I'm coming. I just want to show up. People are like, hi. I
They're gonna
don't
be like,
know if
hi,
you remember.
Dad.
I don't know if you remember me. It's been 7 years.
That's fair. That's also fair. That's crazy that we're that old. But anyway.
True.
So was it then during that junior year that you kind of had like your overture or light bulb moment of like, I think I'm actually gonna do this for a career? Or was it like an experience that you had?
Um, I don't know. I really don't know when that transition happened. I would say maybe sometime around sophomore year was like me kind of really considering like, oh, I think I want to go to school for this. Like I think this is
Mhm.
something I want to do. Um, and then kind of during junior year, it was like, oh, oh yeah, I'm really doing this. And then
Yeah.
that summer after junior year, I did a summer program where I met Paul.
Yes.
And then that was like, I don't know, it was one of those things where it's like when you're doing theater in high school, you're just in this bubble.
Yeah.
It's like all these people, and then uh, you go about, and it's like, oh, wow, there's other people, and they have really cool ideas about things.
Yeah.
And it was just like, it was like literally a 6-week program. Everybody was basically thick as thieves from week one,
Mhm.
and we couldn't, for some reason, couldn't stop talking about the weather. Um, which was like, it literally started out as a joke. It's like, so what's the weather like where you're from? And then next 4 weeks, we would keep talking about the weather, and everyone would go, God damn it, we're talking about the weather again.
So we have to stop that.
Yeah, so but yeah, it was just, I think that was the moment that like fully solidified. It's like, I want to do this. Like this is something I'm really passionate about.
Yeah. It's funny how it's the people that make you go, "Oh, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
I wanna do this."
yeah. So it was like everyone was like kind of weird and had their own ideas, but like everyone was there for the same thing at the end of
Yeah.
the day.
How did you
Um,
end up finding Wagner then? Because obviously you were living in Hawaii at the time. I know since then family has moved to Southern California, but I'm
mhm.
curious how you found Wagner.
um, I think it was a recommendation from my mom when she was looking up, she because
Mhm.
my mom would just like look up a bunch of schools. She'd be like,
Yeah.
she's like, all right, let's do like the 5 you want to that are like solid maybes we'll get into. Which was like, oh god, what were the schools I auditioned for? Emerson, Boston University,
Mhm.
uh
It's
where
like
else did I,
all East Coast.
yeah, um NYU Tisch, uh Carnegie Mellon were like kind of like the big ones that I remember
Yeah,
like
I'm like, I
auditioning
definitely
for.
have a lot of overlaps there with you.
And I'm like, I don't know if I'm gonna get into these, but like I'm gonna audition for them anyway.
Yeah.
And then it was like a couple safety schools, so I applied to DePaul University for their writing program in English.
Mhm.
Um, then I applied to Columbia College in Chicago, Wagner, and I think that was it. But yeah, so Wagner was just one of the schools where it's like, well, I might as well apply here. They're well rated. I think my mom and I did a tour of schools
Mhm.
in like across the East Coast, and Wagner was one of the campuses we visited, and it was like, oh, like this place is really nice, and just like got a nice tour. It was just like, oh, like this was kind of a, I don't know, it's just a good vibe when we visited.
Yeah.
Um, and then I applied, and Wagner gave me a bunch of scholarship money, so I was like, Cool.
And you were like, let's do this. Let's sign the contract, baby. Let's go.
Cool. You guys want to pay for like 60% of my tuition? That sounds sick.
You're
So,
like, I would also like you to do that. So thank you.
yeah. Meanwhile, you've got. I don't want to start getting too mad about things this early, but you got like NYU. We're like, you can come here if you'd like. If you want to be $300,000 in debt.
I know. Tuition is insane to even think about. It's like
Yeah.
now that I'm past it, I'm like, I don't want to think about it.
That's
It's insane. Absolutely
not.
insane. But yeah, no, exactly though. That's exactly where I'm at with that. Well, and
Mhm.
then once you got to Wagner, you got to do a little bit of everything. You got to do some acting, like we were talking about with Midsummer, but then you
Mhm.
also got to be in some really cool, crazy stuff. You did This Is Our Youth, a
Oh
very,
yeah.
very crazy three-hander. And I mentioned this specifically because I remember you had a fun little story. The show involves drugs among many other things, but I remember you telling me about a time where there was definitely a prop that was perhaps filled a little bit more than necessary, and I would love to hear you retell it.
Oh yeah. So, um, This Is Our Youth. One of the cruxes of the show is that the main character Warren steals, I think it's $10,000 of his dad's money. It's either 10 or 100,000. Um, and then his friend Dennis is like, we should buy cocaine and resell it. And Warren is such a follower and afraid of confrontation. They're like, yeah, this is a good idea. So towards the end of the show, he's like mixing it up so they can cut it and then sell the product. And phone rings and Warren drops the cocaine, and that's like a big moment in the show because you literally watch all of the money just disappear.
Yeah.
So we bought, one of those little bags of flour for the show.
Yeah.
During the last show, we were like, well, we've got all this flour left. Let's just put it all in there.
Put it all in.
So I'm sitting there towards the end of the stage. I've got this giant ass plate of cocaine.
Quote unquote.
Phone rings. I drop the whole thing. And then as part of it, Warren gets really pissed, starts stamping in it. And I remember just like stamping in it and then looking, and I'm like, this flour is splashing all over this poor person's backpack that is right next to the stage.
Shouldn't have put your backpack there.
It's like, well, that's a lesson learned to them. And then I went on with the rest of the scene. But yeah. And then I also remember just like talking about it later with Dan. He's like, we wanted a single line of cocaine for Cabaret, and they wouldn't give it to us. Meanwhile, in SRMT,
when the two different student companies are like, we have very different thoughts about prop drugs. What a grand time. That's hilarious. I forgot about what Dan said about
Dan was like, I wanted one line.
And they're
same
like, no.
semester, same slot.
Oh dear God, what a time. No, you guys killed that. That's a hard show, and you guys did a fantastic job at it.
Oh,
Yeah, so crazy.
Fucking Jamie Bayo.
True. I need to get him on here. I've gotten to talk to like Kirsten and Colleen, but I have not gotten to talk to Jamie. So I'll need to bring him on here at some point when he's not busy and all that good stuff. But also while you were at school, you had an opportunity to dramaturg for a very unique production of Susan Glaspell's Trifles.
Yeah.
How did you end up falling into the role of dramaturg? Because when we were at school, dramaturgy was not often done. From what I gather, it's starting to perhaps grow a little bit and change, but dramaturgy wasn't done all that much when we were at Wagner.
I really don't know.
Was it a tech assignment kind of thing? Where you were like, yeah, I can try it for a tech assignment?
Oh, I think it was a tech assignment technically.
I think it probably was.
Yeah, I think they had a list up. I was in David's class at the time. We were literally talking about trifles. I'm like,
yeah,
I might as well. Which was, yeah, that was a strange production.
That was, given that it's a normally very prop and scenic heavy play for those who have not read it. but it was done entirely minimalist, which means that there was an completely empty stage and the actors were in all blacks and there were no props. So
Yeah.
I'm so curious. So this was your first time as a dramaturg, but how did you use that role to not only help the actors in the long, but in the long run, the audience still connect to a show that is so prop heavy?
So my job with that I saw primarily was research of like what are the things they're talking about. So when they're talking about a word, like one of the first things they do when they get in is it's cold. So let's turn on the stove. It's like, okay, what kind of stove are we talking about? What does that
Mhm.
look like? What are the dimensions on it? And kind of like blocking that out for the actors. So during the rehearsal process, we would put spike tape down on where all the pieces of furniture were so that they had consistent reference points before the show started and we'd take up all the spike tape. So there was also things of like, here's what a roller towel is, uh, which is, I, I can't believe people used to use those.
Yeah,
Um,
it's so unsanitary.
Yeah, it's just like, well, I'll just move it a little bit and it's fine.
Yeah, it's dry on this side.
Pretty much. Yeah, and then just kind of like being very nitpicky about like, well, here's what
Mhm.
this detail would look like. Here's something you can imagine, and just kind of like provide all the tools for the actors who were doing this. All of this basically entirely in mime.
Yeah.
Um, and then also like doing things about like research about the origins of the play of Trifle. So some people speculate that sorry, excuse
No,
me.
you're fine.
Um, like Glassbill was a journalist in the Midwest at one
Mhm.
point, and she reported on a case where a woman murdered her husband.
Mm.
Um, and so people are like, this feels like something that was related to that idea. But then I was actually also very recently talking with Zach about
Mhm.
trifles, and it's like really I don't know. It was just so odd because in reality, the play has three major characters,
Right.
which are the two women and the house.
Yeah. The
Like,
men are just keep walking through and interrupting.
yeah, it's like the men are there to kind of show the
The
lack of
stakes
awareness.
and that,
Well,
yeah,
partially the stakes, but also just like they're there to kind of show like these are not things that they would think about.
right.
Like when they're examining it, they're like, well, where's the body? What's it doing? Well, they can
Mhm.
kind of see it's like, oh, here's something that she cared about, like the murderer cared about in the house. That's like, here are things that have been neglected
Mhm.
or kind of put by the wayside as a result. But like, they're not details you would think about. It'd be like, oh, why is there this mess here? Why is there this weird bird in this box? That's
Yeah,
odd. Uh,
exactly. When in
so,
fact, it's those details that meant the most. So I think it's awesome that you did so much valuable research on all of these things so that
mhm.
it was successful for both the actors and the audience. And I feel like if this question feels like kind of a very easy lowball here, but did this experience as a dramaturg end up helping you in your directing?
A little bit.
Okay.
Um, it's one of those things of like, I think doing research before a show is important.
Yeah.
Um, like I feel like dramaturgy is something that should happen in pre-production as opposed to
Mhm.
during production, which is
Yeah,
where we
that's
had it.
fair. Yeah.
Um, but also like when you're doing something like that, the dramaturg has a pretty limited role
Mhm.
overall. So it's like by the by the later stages of that rehearsal is basically the assistant stage manager, where I was doing a
Yeah.
lot of stuff with like lines or just kind of like hanging out. But it's like all of that research is should be kind of front loaded
Yeah.
because it's going to inform a lot of your direction and
Mhm.
understanding of like the scenes and how things are made. Like I don't know. I feel like I've got a lot of eclectic knowledge floating around in my head
Yeah.
that kind of substitutes some of the dramaturgical work that
Mm.
I would do for shows. Um, but also that it's at the end of the day, it's not a substitute. Like
Yeah.
doing research is important, especially if you're doing something historical or set within a specific time period.
Well, and you know how to do the research too. And I think that's a huge part of it because some people don't even necessarily know what kind of research to look for. But I think that experience also, like we're going to talk about Ernest in a second. And I feel like
Oh
that
yeah.
very much plays along those same lines. But I'm curious before asking about Ernest, had you
Mhm.
always known that you wanted to direct before getting to Wagner?
No, I was originally, I think, much more focused on performance, specifically within
Mm,
like acting or I don't know, traditional theater. It's just like I don't know. American
yeah.
theater is so musical focused a lot of the
Yeah.
time that I don't know. It's like I want to act. They're like, "Oh, so do you sing?" And I'm like,
You're like,
"No,
no.
actually,
They're like, you want to do film? And you're like, no,
no.
no, it's
I want to.
different.
I want to do the secret third thing." Um,
Exactly. No, that's exactly it. And there's so many people out there who do enjoy the secret third thing. So don't worry, you have a community for that. But of course, we have to talk about Ernest, the big one that we worked on together. It was
oh,
such
absolutely.
a blast. This was a monster of a show, and yet it was your first show to direct
Oh
while
yeah.
at school. How did you choose Ernest to start with?
Um, so when I was in high school, I actually did way more research on Ernest than I ever thought I was going to.
Mhm.
So it was part of an English class where we were talking about just like the importance of being earnest in general, and one of the things was like give a presentation about some sort of like historical or part of the show.
Mm.
So one thing that like I personally focused on was tea and the importance of tea and like kind of like what it meant for everybody during that time. And it was also just like here's like why cucumber sandwiches and what do cucumber sandwiches represent, because they do represent something in the grand scheme of things, because
Yeah.
only the aristocracy can afford to eat cucumber sandwiches. That's it's
Mm.
a point of kind of showmanship, like kind of subtle, like one of those subtle things of um showing off your wealth that
Yeah,
people in that time
absolutely.
would do.
Mhm.
Because like if you needed to eat something more fortifying, you would have like small little fingerling ham sandwiches or
Mm.
cheese, something more substantial than just
A cucumber sandwich.
bread, water, and butter.
Yeah.
Uh,
That's
uh,
exactly it.
but also like other things where it's like, but also like through that, I got to see a lot of other people's presentations about like smoking jackets. Like, what are they?
Mm.
What was the
Oh, so
importance of smoking?
everyone was doing Ernest, but different aspects historically.
Yeah, so I think we got a couple different things, but it was like me and a couple other people did Ernest. So one of them was like someone did like smoking jackets and was
Mhm.
like, well, what's the importance of smoking during that period of time? Because and it's like smoking jacket, it was a whole other jacket that you wore when you went to go smoke, so the smoke stains and smells wouldn't stay on your clothes. And then we also got to do stuff with like performance. And then one of the research topics I did for my IB program was about movement,
Mm.
and specifically comedy of manners, and how like Oscar Wilde is not considered but is treated as comedy of manners
Yeah,
because
and
it's
I'm gonna pull up pictures while you're talking about this because
oh
I
hell
think
yeah.
it fits perfectly into what we're talking about. I feel like
Mhm.
there's perhaps a picture of Gwendolyn and Cecily that I think of when you're talking about the comedy of manners and the physical aspects of it that are so specific.
Yeah, so like how you move, how you sit, how you stand is all very important because it's kind of a level of like showmanship and like how cultured you are. But
Mhm.
then you also get weird things with Ernest about being like, oh, so like when like what is the role of comedy of manners? What is it supposed to represent? And in one like this, where everyone's getting married at the end, um, it's that everybody ends up with the person of their like class that they're supposed to. Um,
Right.
and this is also something you see reflected in like Shakespeare and a lot of stuff dating from like early 1900s all the way back to like 15 and 1400s.
Yeah.
um, is like if people are getting married, it's about reinforcing that status quo.
Mhm.
So it's that's why like the entire crux of the show is proving that Ernest has this sort of noble breeding, or like otherwise he can never marry because the lineage won't allow it to happen.
Absolutely.
So it's just kind of all these compounding details on top of each other, and also the a lot of that stuff about the mirroring with Cecily and Gwendolyn. I actually so the person I mentioned who's debuting their choreography project on Saturday, they did a scene from Importance of Being Earnest with one of the other friends who was a dancer, and it was very tightly choreographed, and it had like all these very specific movements and mirrored things. And I was like, wow, I love that. I'm going to steal that one day. And then I did.
And then you did, and you're like, heck yeah.
And it was great because it really adds to the humor of these two people who are literally exactly the same, hate each other because they're exactly the same.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I have to pause for just a quick moment because my cats found something in my backpack that they're tearing up, but I will be just a moment. Apologies for everyone who's just hanging out live. This will take 2 seconds. It's in the same room.
Something nice and crunchy.
Hey, can y'all stop? Anything cased in plastic is fair game. So,
it's true.
Trying to just keep them from digging into everything. And of course, former guest Elena and good friend of ours is here live. Hi, hi, hi. Hi, Elena. Happy you could join us. We love you bunches and all that good stuff. Yeah. And so in talking about Ernest, it was so much fun. I auditioned for you, and through figuring out pairings for Gwendolyn and Cecily, it turned out better that I worked as your assistant director. And honestly, that was one of my favorite rehearsal processes, was working on Ernest. It was such a blast and such an amazing group of people. And I don't know how we thought we were going to just put it together in 3.5 weeks, but we did.
Oh shit, it was 3.5 weeks, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was like a stupidly short rehearsal time, but we were like, yeah, it'll be fine.
It'll be fine.
I think Liam was the only one who was really like stressing, but that's fair. He had so much.
Stop worrying about it, Liam.
I'm curious, what were some of the biggest challenges in putting Ernest together that you remember? I can think of some, but I'm curious as to what you would think.
First things I think of was just making sure the transitions were tight.
Yeah.
That was the main one because poor Robert. I was like, Robert, I've got a pitch for you. And Robert was like, sure, this sounds fun. And I think it was fun. But, Robert was, of course, Lane, the Merriman and Chasuble.
The Chasuble.
And of course, they had some scenes where there's maybe 30 seconds between Merriman leaving and Chasuble coming back on.
I swear it was built. I feel like Oscar Wilde is just begging for someone to have to play all three parts, because there truly is only 2 or 3 lines in between every single one of their entrances and exits, but none of them are on stage at the same time. I'm like, you are asking for this. I will provide it for you.
Yeah, I was like, because that wasn't even like a casting decision. That was just like, this is what I want for this specifically.
You're like, this is my concept.
Yeah, and then God, the hardest thing was just honestly just finding all the pieces.
The costumes.
Costumes were. I'm amazed they turned out looking as good as they did. At the end of the day, finding furniture. We had a budget of like $100, I believe, in total, for costuming and props. We got a table for $30. We spent the rest on the costumes, and everything else we just crowdsourced from people.
Yeah.
And it turned out great. Shout out to Jay and the random ass bookshelf they had in their home.
Yeah. Just the confidence that we all had. We're like, yeah, we'll figure it out.
Yeah. And it's like, Ernest is honestly one of the pieces that like I feel the best about.
Yeah.
Where it was produced and where it was left.
Yeah.
Just because like in totality, Yeah, like the only thing that would make it better would be more expensive props.
Yeah, I agree. I think everything was spot on besides
Hmm.
besides the lack of money we had to make it look pretty. Like I
Yeah,
think everything
it's
else was spot on.
I think there's like humor you can do where it's like if you have like the person playing Merriman slash the Chasuble doing their quick chains in a place where the audience can clearly see it.
Right.
Um, so it's just like, and then they come
Yeah.
on as a completely different character. But like that's like the only thing where I'm like that could be something funny you could add, but
Yeah.
that's also like you get into like immersion breaking stuff with Comedy of Manners that's more nuanced. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's one where I'm like, yeah, I don't think we need more time.
No. No. And then of course I think it was that spring. Yeah, it would have been that spring because it was my
Yeah.
senior year. Came 12th night. Did you end up doing 12th night because of our Shakespeare class previously, or was that entirely coincidental to want to do 12th night?
Um, I think so. I It was partially because of that, and also because Twelfth Night is a show I was just familiar with.
Yeah.
Um, I was like, I'm gonna submit for a show. I'm gonna submit a Shakespeare. I know Twelfth Night backwards and forwards. I was in it at
Yeah.
one point. We had just spent a semester learning basically everything about it. I got to see the CSC production of it, which was fantastic.
Oh, that product the Fiasco Theaters Company's production still is locked in my memory. I'm so glad we got to see that production of 12th Night because it
Yeah,
was phenomenal.
yeah, and it was just like I'm like, this is a show where it's like nobody's done it at Wagner recently.
Mhm.
Um, People love this show.
Yeah.
Uh, and also CSP wanted something they could do for cheap.
Yeah. And you're like, I
And
got even better. I have free.
I have free, and I'll need like $30 for props.
Exactly. I think maybe either me or Scenic had the most budget in terms of like
Yeah.
production because as for doing costumes, again, I still mostly pulled from everyone's closets.
Hmm.
But yeah, and it was
Is
funny
there
because
anything?
I auditioned for you and Bill for that one, and I became your costume designer, and it is the only show I will ever costume because I was like, it was this show that I remember going up to you and being like, cool, you have a great cast. How can I be a part of this? Because I freaking love this show. And you were like, we need costumes. And I'm like, I got you. Never costume designed before and probably will never will again, but it was such a fun show to get to do that for.
Oh yeah, and that was one where I was just like, God, Twelfth Night was a monster. But that's also I will say that was my own fault. I've got strong opinions on Shakespeare. You should never cut lines from Shakespeare. You can do it. I promise you, you can do the entire show in under 2 hours. Um, Anyone who tells you otherwise is probably lying, or you're doing a history. Or Hamlet.
Yeah,
Hamlet.
no, that's fair.
Hamlet. You can't do in under 2 hours. Um,
Figure I'll bring up some pictures just to click through while we're talking about it.
yeah. Um, yeah. This is a fun show. Um,
You
this.
and Bill had way too much fun on the physicality in this show,
Oh
particularly
yeah.
in like the stage combat of it. My lord.
Yeah. There's the stage combat. There was the. I think we called it the. We ended up calling it the garden scene. This one that's on
Yeah.
stage where Malvolio's reading the letter, um, which was just like, I mean, let's just lean into how like kind of ridiculous this premise is. Of all of these people are like,
There's nothing to hide behind. So we're like,
yeah,
well,
there's nothing to hide behind, so you all are statues. Um,
and Elena in chat concurs. This was one of her favorite parts of the show. Agreed. It
um,
was mine as well. It was my favorite to watch every night.
yeah, just because it was fun. It was just like this was just like dumb and stupid, and it's like
Yes.
the whole premise of the show is just ridiculous. And people are like, "Do we need Viola and Sebastian to look the same?" I'm like, "No,
No.
it doesn't matter. You just need you just kind of need them to hold the same swagger. Oh, this was great. The
Yeah,
lighting on
well,
this
and
was so good.
oh, it was so good. Well, I even remember having that conversation with you for Sebastian and Cesario, and like I just had them wearing like the same colors and same like vest, shirt,
Hmm.
khakis, page boy cap, and people were like, "Oh, I get it," and I was like, "Nice."
Yeah, that's literally all you need. It's like, do these characters vaguely look like the same? Oh, I love this moment.
The
I
plunger swords always.
well, plunger sword's great, but also I was just like, let's just have Ryan pull out a gun.
Yeah, yeah, why not? I mean, water gun, but like, yeah, why not?
Yeah, I'm like, I think this is funny and stupid, and I can get away with it. Um,
Exactly.
so
And I
12,
believe that. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say 12 Nights, one of those shows where I'm like, I wish I had one more week. I can't say why now, but I remember when we were opening, I'm just like, I just want a little more polish on it.
No,
Um,
I feel that.
but at the same time, like it opened, it was fantastic.
Yeah.
It was great.
And I believe that because of 12th night, more students on campus got the idea of developing the third student run company, which is now Shakespeare on
Yeah.
the Oval. Now
Um,
Shakespeare isn't nearly as rare as it used to be now as it was on that campus. So, I mean, not to be like, congratulations, Austin, but also at the same time, you were a major part of it. Congratulations.
yeah, their whole original e-board was
Members of
it
the 12th
was
night cast.
yeah, it was Fiona, Emily Golden,
Hmm.
and Brianna.
Yeah. Brand
So
Cielo. Yeah.
yeah, so I was like, hell yeah, go off.
I love that. Exactly. And then after I graduated during your senior year, you had the chance to direct one more show. And I think it's funny that it took until your third show to do a contemporary play.
Yeah,
Uh, you were
that
like,
tracks.
no, let's just do Ernest and then Shakespeare, and now I'll do a contemporary. You did Reasons to Be Pretty by Neil LaBute.
Yes.
I'd love to hear what it's about. I'm going to bring up some pictures to look at it really quick, but I would love to hear about what the show's about and what it was like putting it together. I know it's a bit
Ooh,
darker because, it's Neil LaBute,
LaBute.
but
Uh, um, Reasons to Be Pretty is man, how do you start with that? The
or
the
basic
play
plot structure if need
yeah,
be.
the play opens with the two main characters in just a full-blown argument uh because God, I'm forgetting the main characters' names.
That's
Um,
okay.
but the main character like is basically just like talking shit with his guy friends. They're like, oh, like, your girlfriend's like ugly or plain. He's like, well, I don't give a shit about that because like I like her just the way she are. That's not exactly what he said.
Yeah.
The way he actually worded it sounds not great, to
Yeah.
say the least. But it's also in such a way that I think no matter what, you can sit there and you're like, I can see what he was trying to say, and I know exactly why she's furious.
Yes.
Um, so it's a truly unfortunate situation. I think the main character is trying to figure out what he wants, and kind of like dealing with the fallout of this relationship, dealing with his weird ass guy friend at work, and also like his weird relationship with his partner Carly, and it's a lot of about like perceptions of beauty, both from the person being perceived and from the people outside of it,
Mhm.
and just like, I don't know, I think it's one of those plays where you kind of sit there at the end and you go, huh, and you try to dissect how it could have gone better, and I think at the end of the day it's the best it could have been.
Yeah. I think that's a really great way of putting it. Absolutely. Because I
Mhm.
remember going through it when you were looking at doing it, I think, at some point, or I'd done a scene from it for directing. And I remember being like, yeah, that's kind of how LaBute's plays kind of go, but also like that's how this one in particular goes.
Yeah.
And it looked
Oh,
like
that
you had
was
a really
actually It was actually Elena and David that did that scene for directing.
Yes, yes, I remember that. I was like, I remember doing it, but I can't remember like who's in it. And of course, Elena, sorry. You're in chat now. I'm sorry.
Mhm.
But yeah, I'm sure that was really special to get to work on a contemporary play with such strong actors as well.
Yeah. It was one of those it was one of those weird things where I don't know. That play was a learning experience, I think, for me as a director, just because I was relying a lot on the production company at the time to do advertisements for like getting actors. I think I personally should have pushed for it a lot harder. There was like issues getting the rights, and they didn't want to advertise before they had the rights. But as a
Mm.
result, they only had like 48 hours between when an advertisement went out and when the auditions happened. Um, Viraj and Jack were the only two guys that auditioned. And I was like, this is fine. Like, I'll
Yeah,
be
well,
great.
and they were
Um,
strong, lovely actors to work with, so
yeah,
that helps.
fucking Emily was fantastic.
Yeah.
Like, I enjoyed working with my cast overall. Um, and but it was one of those things where it's like, all right, I gotta like if I'm doing something like this in the future, I gotta do more legwork just so I can have a bigger pool to pull from, and just so people are more aware of what's going on. Because
Oh, 100%.
um, but that show I think solidified one of my um kind of my focus on movement, which I had been really developing kind of just through like a classical lens.
Yeah.
Um, but then with Reasons to Be Pretty, I got to focus on a lot of really kind of like fun ideas, because I remember Bird coming up after me talking, and they're like, how do you get your blogging to look natural? Which was like a really great compliment and
Yeah.
to me at the time, but it was also just like, well, I only half blocked the show, really. Like a lot of it was just that whole first scene. I'm like, all right, you are trying to get in his face. You are trying to avoid making eye contact with her the whole time.
Mm.
And that was just how it is. So like he's moving around, he's looking, because he's looking, I think he's looking for his keys or something else in the apartment at the time. And she's trying to confront him and talk to him. And then it's like, now, so the choice when you turn and look at her, it's so much more significant because you haven't been looking at her this whole time. So it allowed me
Mm.
to really play with focus and more specific and natural movement, which Shakespeare and more classical theater doesn't really give you the opportunity to do. So I got to like really refine that idea of movement, and movement is something I've always been kind of fascinated with in theater.
Yeah.
Just because as an actor, it's not something you think about as much.
Mm-mm.
Because it's like, I gotta think about what I'm saying and why I'm saying it, which is important. But when you're a director, you're like, how do I get you to make these pretty pictures while also moving in a way that is purposeful?
Yeah.
Um, so, and I thought I did a pretty good job of that with like some of these scenes of just like allowing kind of a lot of that fun framing. We had kind of fun lights for that show. I remember we had lights at each of the four corners, and
Mhm.
then just a wash. So all of the direct light was always along the diagonals,
Mm.
um, which was also really great because it
All the
made it sound like
entrances and exits.
all the exits and entrances were lit in really cool ways, but also when you're directing in the round, you got to be on your diagonals at all times.
Yes,
So I was like,
truly.
so it's like my actors know when they're not in the light. Easy, simple. They'll be on their diagonals at all times. It's not something I have to worry about now.
Exactly.
Um, yeah.
Well, and that's so funny that you bring all that up because I was going to ask, because every director works differently. I love to ask them about like what are some of the different like values and beliefs. Excuse me. Hello. So sorry. Tamale's just like, I want to
Hi,
cuddle
Tamale.
now. Hi, buddy. You want to ask this question too? Um, want to ask like what kind of values and beliefs do you hold as a director, or what like how you run a rehearsal room?
Um, I think my most of the time, if I'm doing something classical, my first thing is like like, this is how we're going to move, and this is why we're going to move that way.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're doing something in the space, movement is so much more specific, and it needs to be something that they're aware of. And when I was doing something more contemporary, we started from the text, because a lot of contemporary shows, there's a lot more in between the lines
Mm-hmm.
than there is. Like, Shakespeare is not something where you're never reading between the lines. People are always saying exactly what they're thinking, and if they're not, they're going to tell you right before or right after. So you don't need a second guess. It's like, what's their motivation here? They're going to tell you, I
Yeah.
promise. So with something more contemporary, it's like, all right, we're going to start from the text. Once we establish general feel of the text, I try and get to blocking right away.
Mm-hmm.
Because movement is what makes a scene. It's not living until it's on its feet. And it's like something I'm surprised of myself, that I've kind of fell into this approach, just because, like, as an actor, I'm very text focused. It's like
Yeah.
but as a director, I'm like, the text isn't my job anymore. Now it's you. You're the actor. You know this character better than I do. My job is now to frame the story that you are going to be in and make you look good. So, like, I basically ignore text except for, when I've got to, like, actually look at it. It's like, all right, things have to happen here. What's going on?
Yeah.
But otherwise, it's really just like movement and blocking. It's like, you're going here to here. Why are you going here to here? And either asking or kind of developing, and just, like, I think a lot of it is just asking a lot of questions of the actors, so I know what they're thinking, and if something's not matching up, then I can be like, we can kind of, like, sit there and hash out. It's like, all right, why is this not working? Like, what are you thinking about?
Yeah.
And, like, an unfortunate side effect of that style of directing, I think, is it takes a lot more time
Fair.
to really sit there and hash it out, as opposed to just going, you're going to say it like that. Because that, at the end of the day, that's efficient. Like, if
Yeah.
I'm like, you're going to say it like this, and you're going to figure out why you're saying it like that, that is something you can do. But at the same time, like, theater is a collaboration. Like,
I think it's very much quality over quantity in that sense in terms of time. So
yeah,
I think while it's not always the most time efficient, I think it's what works. And I was gonna say something essentially equivalent to this, but Elena popped into chat and said that first scene talking about reasons to be pretty is so cool to work on. Austin is a special director in making you feel natural and authentic on stage. And I think that's a huge thing that anyone that I've talked to that you've directed, either I've talked to on this show or even off camera as well, has all said similar things. You're always researched and prepared, and just like, thank you for being a good director that listens to actors and works with them
I
and all
try.
that kind of good stuff. And to interrupt this sort of flow of things, we do have an Instagram question from our good friend Liam Abate.
Ooh.
And it's kind of like, I don't know, coming out of nowhere, which is fine. But out of curiosity, now that you're living in the city, what are the main differences between living in Hawaii, California, and New York?
Ooh. Man. Wow, what are the biggest things? I think Hawaii and New York are much more similar,
Mhm.
as places, just because there's a lot more people in New York, but at the same time, the city is small as hell.
Yeah.
Like, I've fully run into, like, people that I'm just like, why the hell are you here?
Yeah,
Um,
same.
and it's like, that's something that would just happen in Hawaii. You'll just, like, see someone and be like, oh, hey, how's it? And then for me, one of the reasons I really didn't like living in LA was it felt really isolating.
Yeah.
Um, just because everything's so far away. You have to make a lot of concerted effort to try and see someone, and usually you're committing to, like, a 45 to 50-minute drive to do that.
100%.
Where it's like, here, I mean, yeah, it's like 30, 45 minutes, but it's on the subway. I can do other things on the subway.
Yeah.
Or we can meet up somewhere in between and it's like not a hassle for anyone.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. It's just kind of the sense of closeness of community, I guess, would be the main thing.
Yeah.
Hawaii feels tight knit no matter what. Everybody knows somebody. Like, I could literally every time I meet someone else from Hawaii, I'm like, oh, what high school? And they'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And then now we're
Exactly.
talking about what same teachers we had and whose siblings we went to school with. And it's just how it is. It's one of those. Hawaii is the largest small town that ever existed.
Yeah.
It's a population of 3 million people, and everybody's about 2 degrees of separation from each other.
Of course, of course. And I'm taking a brief moment to pause because I noticed when we were starting to answer that question, the live ticker on this episode reset. So I'm curious as
Interesting.
to whether this has been continuous. I can't even
I mean,
tell.
I see a live thing in the top of my screen that says 56 minutes.
Yeah, on my end it says that we've been live for 3 minutes. But we have been live for a while. So we're going to have to go back and check on YouTube and see. But for now, we're going to keep going and trucking through
Oh
this
yeah.
episode. I think it'll probably be fine and this will just be like a little blip, but that's okay. Other thing we also wanted to talk about was now again, now that you're in the city and now that we're out of college and all this other stuff. Okay, thank you, Elena, for confirming that it has been going continuously. My end is just like freaking out a little bit. Beautiful. We're all here. We're all good. How unclear directing and producing is once you're first starting out, and especially when you're out of college. Because I know in our experience, you're not taught it at all. And so often you're told, make your own work, but then you're not given the tools to know how to go about doing producing. You're like, just create it. And it's like, okay, but it can't just like sit in a corner.
But what does that mean?
Yeah. So I'd love to hear your perspective.
I think and I've been thinking about this a lot more lately. But one of the frustrations I think that is more specific to theater than most other performing arts is just that producing a show is expensive.
Yes.
Takes a lot of time commitment, and you need a lot of different people with very different skills.
Yeah.
And that's pretty unique to theater. I feel like if you're doing a dance show, usually you're sharing that space with other people, so the money's not as much of an issue. Most of the performers you have are already specialized in whatever you're doing, so it's like, I don't think finding actors or performers is the issue. It's finding crew. It's finding an LD, a set designer.
Designers.
And just like, all right, you have all these people. Are they getting paid, or is this a passion project? Like, that's just how it is. Like, am I sinking money into this, or am I trying to make money out of this? And it's just not easy, because the other thing is just like, all right, now I have to spend money on advertising. Now I have to spend money on the space and rehearsal space. And there are resources now, like you've got places like the Tank that are like, part of their deal is like, we cover the production and advertising costs, but we take part of the ticket revenue. And it's like, that's great. They've only got so many shows they can fit into their theater every year. Like, that's just how it is. And it's just, I don't know. Theater is, to me, always feels so much less accessible than other arts in terms of starting out.
Absolutely.
I don't think it's necessarily more work as much as the pieces for it are more specific and harder to find, which, I don't know, just sucks.
Yeah.
Overall.
Easy as that. No, 100%. I absolutely agree. And I guess this conversation then, like, I guess by the end of it, it's like, hey, we can at least all commiserate that this is weird and we should have all been taught it. And also, if you're in school, go research it for yourself now. Start looking, start figuring out what that is. And even if you're like, well, I'm not going to create things or like whatever, just get to know it.
It's good to know.
You just
Um,
start looking at it just so that
well,
you're aware of how it works, because you do need to know as a theater
yeah.
professional how these things work.
Well, because the other thing is like the people that are taught it are producers.
Exactly.
And usually if you're training to be a producer, you're going to join a production company.
Mm-hmm.
You're not self-producing your own work,
Yeah,
which is a whole different bag of worms.
yeah,
Because
exactly.
I know Bill's partner is a producer as well, right?
Yeah, among many other things, working at Lincoln Center and things like that. But yeah.
Yeah, and has like I just remember having the conversation about them about like producing your own work, and it's like here's all these logistical things you
And
need
you're
to
like,
think about, and I'm like, uh, that's so
that's
much.
stressful. Yeah, no, and it is though, and it's something that we should all have learned sooner. But
Yeah,
better late than never, I
yeah,
guess.
and also, but
um,
also on top of that, it's like, how do you apply to be a director anywhere? Because
Truly.
I straight up, I don't think it happens. I think people are just like, hey, you do this, and you get asked. Um,
It's it's a whole process, because some places you apply to be a director, other places it's who you already know. And that's a whole nother can of worms that, unfortunately, because we're coming to the end of the episode, we cannot open that can of worms. But I think that's all to say. Unfortunately, I don't think our this isn't a Wagner issue by any means. I don't think theater programs in general prepare for the end part, being getting out into the world as much as we probably
yes,
should. We do as much as we
yeah,
can, but there's only so much you can fit into a curriculum, and some things should be focused on a little bit more. But
yeah.
c'est la vie. And of course, I was going to show a clip of a rehearsal of a short play of Zach's that you directed, and I was also had notes to chat about coffee. Because we're gonna go over anyway, I'm gonna ask one question about coffee. You've been
Absolutely.
getting into really cool latte art. How hard is it? It looks so hard.
Um, it's it like anything is dedicated practice. I think there are some things you can learn that are just like how do you make good milk texture, but like that just takes time and dedicated practice. And then also things like you can start with certain patterns, like start with a heart. Once you get a heart, you do tulip, which is just like two hearts on top of each other. Then you can learn to do like a wiggle and then the pull through. So it's all just like specific things and muscle memories. And sometimes you're working on something and it's not working, and then you'll do one thing and it clicks, and you're like, oh, I've just been doing it wrong the whole time. And then everything makes sense after that, and then you move on to the next step.
So it's just a craft. It's art. It's theater.
It's an art. It like any other art, just practice. Like
Who knew that we would connect latte art and theater to the very end of this
yeah.
episode?
Yeah.
But
Also, quick side note: May
also,
18th. May 18th, there's a latte art throwdown happening at my store.
well, there we go. We got to go check it out
It
and
is
watch
open
you
to the
throw down.
public. I will.
Where is it? Where can people come find you do latte art?
9 East 13th Street by Union Square.
Amazing.
May 18th.
Go watch Austin throw down and do some latte art.
Yeah, I'll probably get out in the second round, but it'll be a great time, and you'll get to see some people do some crazy things. I think there's been a seahorse at every throwdown that's happened in New York's like this year.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
I don't know how to do that. That's crazy.
You're like,
People
but
are
someone
wild.
does, and that's cool. Oh my God, that's crazy. No, that's super fun. Thank you for letting me know about that. And you'll probably have to remind me, but that's okay. Where can people find you and connect to you on social media? I know you're not a huge social media person, but where
I'm
can
not a
people
huge.
find you and that kind of thing?
I've got an Instagram. It's Nakamura.Austin, right?
I believe so. Yes.
Yes, it is. I didn't have to look that up.
That's okay. You're not the only one. Don't worry.
Yeah, it's Nakamura.Austin on Instagram. You can probably look me up on Facebook, I guess. I don't know if people use Facebook. I don't think I have any other social media. I frankly
okay.
refuse. I refuse to use Twitter.
That's okay. It's dying anyway. So
Yeah, it's fine.
all fine. It's all going downhill. Tamale really wants to be a part of this episode today. My lord. But it's okay. The two places easy to find you. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter until it combusts.
Explodes,
At
right.
Yeah, exactly, at Lora_Marjoram, and at my website www.loramarjoram.com. You can find this show on Instagram at Overtures Show. Excuse me, my cat. And on YouTube, just search Overtures Show. Subscribe, comment, say hello live. It's so fun to get to chat with people live. If for those of you not watching live and listening to this in a future podcast on Spotify and Apple Music, you're missing out on all of the cat
All this cat
action
action.
that's just happening right now. And then we also have a Ko-Fi page, so if you feel so inclined to donate a coffee, it helps go towards the production expenses for this podcast. That way I can continue talking to wonderfully talented theater artists like Austin and keep uplifting their voices and all that good stuff. My next stream is to be determined. I'm literally in the middle of scheduling right now. So keep an eye out on the Instagram. That's where all of the upcoming episodes are posted. So follow, you can submit questions there as well, and all that good stuff. But yeah, Austin, do you have any final thoughts for viewers live and in the future?
Keep doing the work. Progression, not perfection, always.
Absolutely. And with that, thank you so much for being on. Thank you guys for watching, and we will see you next time. Bye.